systems up and running here. I'm co-broadcasting to a bunch of different places, so we're gonna kick off just to start. Talking about some housekeeping. First of all, my voice is not fully recovered from my 2 weeks of crazy intense podcasting. I'm going to try and take this next week a little bit easier, even though I've got some audio kit that I need to review. This is the wrong voice to go about reviewing microphones and high end recording tech. So that's not going to be a very good look for me. I tried to do the math, and I actually missed a couple shows the first time I ranked through it all. But between hosting for Newegg, doing my own podcasts, and guesting on other people's podcasts, for 2 weeks straight, I recorded, I think, 5 days a week. Yeah. So averaging between 2 and 6 hours of talking throughout the day, which was pretty crazy. So that is something that I'll have to be very careful with if I'm going to keep making money on this sexy instrument that I've got here. We've got a couple other pieces of housekeeping that I want to get to. Hopefully my voice isn't too distracting as we go through all of this. I see some people jumping into the chat from Sherrill. Hey, Juan Bagnell, you sound extra sexy today. Warm tea with honey can help alleviate the sexy voice, I think. Yeah, I don't like it when my voice gets too raspy and too smoky, but I'm definitely been all over some smooth tea and some honey to help coat everything that's going on in there. For now, I'm just going to talk really quiet, and this is going to be Some Gadget Guy Monday Morning Tech Chat After Dark. That doesn't make any sense. So, also coming up, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I'm a huge fan of This Week in Tech, Leo Laporte's channel. His television station dedicated to all things tech and geek. So, looking at Twit. This is I had the honor, as always. I'm always honored when they ask me to come on, but I did another guest host on All About Android, talking about phones, and I was just really excited. Even though the show is focused on Android gear, they let me jump in and kind of geek out on a bunch of audio stuff. So so this is from Absence of Nunchi on Periscope. Is this live? This is absolutely is live. I'm recording this right now. Volume seems a bit low. I can try and turn it up, Demir, but I also can't talk very loud. So I'll see if this gives you guys a little bit more gain. And from Akasuna, hey Juan, are you doing phone comparisons like Fight for Blood, Punch Punch? I haven't been doing many punch. I haven't been doing many Fight for Blood comparison style things. That's actually one of the pieces of housekeeping I wanted to get to. So let's cover that. Then I'll get back to All About Android, and we'll use that as a segue. I'm trying to spend more time with every phone that I review. So I'm currently wrapping up my time with the Honor View 10. I don't really think I gave it a fair shot. I only was able to get an audio review out. I'm still wrapping up the camera review because we've had some sort of hit and miss weather in Southern California, and I want to be shooting the best possible samples of photography and video that I can from that phone. And then I wanted to spend some time with it as an actual daily driver. And I came to the realization, like, the previous editorial schedule that I was working on, unbox phone, do 24-hour first impressions video, do 5 comparison videos, crank out a camera review, and then wrap up a finished full review, and you've spent a week with the device, but you haven't really used it, you've just been benchmarking it, isn't really a sustainable commentary on a device. So I've been sitting out. I didn't rush to grab a Galaxy S9. I'm probably not going to rush to be front of the line for a Huawei P20. I really want to have informed commentary like I used to on this channel, where the longer term reviews really felt like they were more satisfying and that they were more appropriate for the conversation. So big dog in the house. What's up, folks? David Morgan, as good as the P20 is, do you think it's a bit of an iPhone 10 copycat? I mean, there are some design cues I really wish Huawei hadn't jumped on. This has always been sort of the hallmark of the P series phones, that I wished that they weren't looking for design inspiration to Apple. When you look at the Mates always stood apart as being these baller beast phones all about productivity and big screen sizes and huge batteries. And I kind of wish Huawei had found their own design language for the P series too. So whether or not it's an outright copycat, we're in the age of the notch. So I think that's a pretty clear indication of where they were drawing their bezel influence from. But yeah, the fact that they're willing to take risks on technology is at least heartening when you look at that camera sensor. But oh, TK Bay, what's up, buddy? How's it going, TK? TK's a really good friend of mine. If you aren't subscribed to his channel, and I saw Demir Frank in the chat too. Demir and TK, awesome dudes. You absolutely should be subscribed to their YouTube channels too. So that's my manifesto. I think a reasonable review schedule for a solo reviewer, someone who's doing this all on their own and has other projects that they want to accomplish too, is about a month per phone. I don't know that I can really rush to review more than 12 phones in a year. And that might even be pushing it. Like my experiences with the View 10, like if I had cut the review the first week as opposed to the time I've spent using it since, it would have been a very different commentary from what I'm going to produce probably within the next week on that phone. And so that's really how I feel I'm best able to join this conversation moving forward. And also, I'm still of the mind that I don't want to be overly, pressing PR relationships and trying to scrounge for every piece of kit. In getting sick 2 weeks ago, I lost some time on my production schedule, and unfortunately I didn't get to review a microphone that I really liked, but I just couldn't work it into my schedule. Had to send it back, kind of damaged my relationship with a PR outlet that I tied up some of their gear for a while and I didn't get a video out on it. And I don't want to be in those kinds of positions where I'm beholden to some kind of editorial schedule, which compromises the discussion and compromises the quality of commentary that I'm giving to you guys. At the same time, I also have to figure out how to get the bills paid. Yeah, that's pretty rough, especially what with YouTube videos not really monetizing, not really sharing. And I'm still going through almost every single video I upload being at least monitored. So last week's Monday Morning Tech Chat, it never was officially demonetized. I never got the orange $sign on my video playlist, but I got a very suspicious email from YouTube saying, oh, we've cleared your video for monetization. So they might even be stealth demonetizing now. And again, it makes me really want to throw on my tinfoil hat. Demir Frank, I reviewed 63 phones last year. Totally insane and silly. Dude, much respect. And Demir's reviews are not light. Demir isn't putting out like 3-minute overview videos where he reads the specs off the side of the box. I mean, he's putting together some legit videos, some really long form discussion on that. And that's insane, man. I mean, props, but I definitely can't handle that. And I hope you get outside more often this year than you did last year. So that segues me into All About Android, where I got to, excuse me, I got to really geek out on some audio tech. I was talking up Samsung. The review on this is going to be out this week. Really cool wireless kit for a focus on phone production. I talked about a really high quality MP3 player. So this was on loan. This is on loan from Mr. Mobile. Mr. Mobile hooked me up with this is the Echo Box, and this is a dedicated high quality, high res audio player that also happens to run a really ancient build of Android, and we talked about that. But lastly, and this is where I need you guys and I need your help. They at All About Android every week they do a viewer poll based on an app that everyone brings to the table, and they call it the Android Arena. And so, because I was talking about a whole bunch of stuff audio, I thought, what's really interesting is how much work we can actually get done from our phones. If you followed my channel at all, you know that I've become a huge advocate and a huge proponent for video shooting, editing, and rendering all from your mobile devices. An app like Cyberlink Power Director, shooting really high quality 4K video from your camera. You can edit, you can chroma key, you can put everything together on the spot in the moment from the device that actually captured the video. And it's actually a really interesting workflow. And a lot of people will get their undies and twists, how hard it is to do things like that from such a small screen. And those kinds of people need to be slapped, because we're paying $700, $800, $900 for phones that rival mid-range laptops in terms of power. So why not start doing more stuff from our phones? So I need your help in the vote. I'm leading this Android arena by a super slim margin. So if you go to twit.to/AAA poll363, once again, twit.to/AAA poll363, AAA poll 363, you're going to see 3 apps. And just like I've been pumping up video production, Android Audio Evolution Mobile Studio for Android. Audio Evolution Mobile Studio. I need your votes. The voting ends tomorrow as they go to produce this week's episode of All About Android. So Audio Evolution Mobile is a kick-ass mobile studio. And of course, in the live chat while we were recording the show, All About Android, a bunch of people were like, oh, it's so hard to do things like that from a small screen. Why don't you just wait until you can take it to a computer? And like, you're dumb and you need to be slapped. Think about just like we try and produce things. We try and do like podcasts. We try and do commentary. We try and host discussion and videos. And if you had the tool set to do a really high quality studio mix from the device that captured the audio, and say you had a really cool kit of wireless microphones so that you could mic up an interview, and you had someone else shooting the video, and you could sync all that stuff together, and you'd never have to whip out a laptop or take all of those files, go back home or go back to your office, transfer all of that media to another computer, organize it there, and then start working. Just think about how much improvement you would have to your workflow for the more immediate stuff that you need. Obviously, you're always going to need to have a proper workstation for really high-end stuff. No one's going to cut a documentary on their phone today. But once we can start expanding things like Android P, giving us better screen resolution and screen awareness, it'd be pretty cool if your Android phone could plug into like a little mini monitor that then also expanded its palette and expanded its reach. And Android was smart enough to know what to do with that space. You could go dual monitor on your phone and actually get some legit work done that way with some of these new apps. So Audio Evolution Mobile Studio needs your vote. All About Android, episode 363. So that also brings me to my next little segue here. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to try not to do too much biology stuff in front of the microphone, but you might hear me clearing my throat and clearing my sinuses occasionally as we go through this. I'm going to be teasing something that Mr. Mobile has coming up, which isn't really kosher, but because I mentioned that he loaned me the Echo Box, Mr. Mobile has a review coming out on a really interesting microphone. He asked me to jump in on some of the commentary regarding the technology, why certain types of audio technology work for studio applications versus the types of mics that we use out in the field. And so I cut together like a 4.5-minute treatise on different types of recording tech. Like, it's an intro to an audio reinforcement collegiate class that I sent to him. So I went a little overboard because I bet the review of the mic that he's looking at putting out will probably only be about 6 minutes long. And so I doubt he's going to use all 4 minutes of that. But later today on my Patreon, I'm going to be putting up the full raw video of what I sent to him, just for anyone who's curious about mic tech, recording tech, and some of the differences of different types of recording capabilities. I even take apart a large diaphragm condenser on the video to show the different working parts of what makes this mic different than, say, the mic that I use for my podcasting. So I'll be putting that up on my Patreon. It's only going to be for Patreon users because I don't want to spoil Mr. Mobile's review too much. And instead, I'm just kind of using that to tease what he's working on. But that's also not something I'm going to be putting out main on my channel. After his review goes live, I did spend enough time with it that I also have my own review of this particular microphone that I'll be putting up on my own channel. But like I said, he did me a solid, and I don't want to unseat his work. So be on the lookout for that too. So from Leon too, I can't find the link for the poll. The poll should just be front and center on that page. If you go there, you should see just like 3 oval bars, and you just click on one of the bars. From Fat Produce on Twitch, knowing Mr. Mobile's personal style, I'd expect the kick he's reviewing to be made of about 90% wood materials. Yeah, when it comes to things like the different materials that we can make, the mic, oh, okay. Knowing Mr. Mobile's personal style, I'd expect the mic he's reviewing to be made of about 90% wood materials. That makes a lot more sense, Andrew. I now understand what you're talking about. And Fat Produce, I have a link in my tweet as well. Oh, yes, Andrew, at Fat Produce on Twitter, also helped me out with a tweet, just trying to help drum up a little bit more support for my run on Audio Evolution Mobile. So, yeah, some really cool audio kit coming to my channel and Mr. Mobile's channel. Really fun discussions on capturing content and all about Android. They let me geek out on a bunch of audio kit too. I think now's the right time for people to just take another second and look at what kind of content they like to capture, they like to produce, and understanding that the capabilities you have today are really extreme. They're pretty formidable at lower and lower price points. So if you've ever been interested in producing your own content or just trying to step up your own family and friends stuff, now would be a really good time to look at what it is that you can accomplish. Lastly, and this is just sort of the personal personal housekeeping note. Today, as I'm recording this, this is April 9th, 2018, and tomorrow, April 10th, is my 14-year wedding anniversary with my wife, Marie. And so just on the podcast today, I can't imagine my life without this beautiful, amazing woman, the mother of my child, and all of the adventures we've been through. And it's crazy to think that we've been married for 14 years. So just my own little personal heartwarming moment that, things are pretty good. I like where things are at right now. And I'm definitely excited to be spending the next 14 years of my life with this amazing woman, and the 14 years after that, and the 14 years after that. And eventually we'll all be able to upload our consciousness into amazing supercomputers where she and I can spend eternity exploring the galaxy together. I think that would be a pretty fun, final end game, is just beam us into a satellite and then just shoot us off into space, and we could spend the rest of our lives exploring the cosmos. So, happy anniversary, Marie. I love you. I love you madly. All right, let's get into some news. I'm going to drink some water because everyone in the chat saying Juan needs gum or cough drops. Don't die. I'm probably not going to die, but this is going to be the voice you're going to hear throughout. And especially with people that are more immediately joining the live stream, especially from the Periscope. I'm kind of working off some laryngitis, so I'm not going to be too demonstrative in what I'm talking about today. But I want to start off with some light social media news, because we'll have some heavier social media news coming up later in the show. This is coming courtesy of Engadget. We're talking about Snapchat reviving chronological stories for some users. From Cheryl, just hope your voice doesn't die. I too hope my voice doesn't die. Okay, so I have ranted. Again, I talk about people who get their undies in twists about things. My biggest undies twister is social media that starts cultivating my feed and taking me away from a chronological layout for people's posts. And Snapchat is another one of those services where the immediacy of the experience that people are sharing in that moment should never be messed with. I want to swear significantly more than I am able to on this live stream, because I try to keep this live stream relatively PG. It bothers the poop out of me when I go through someone's like on Instagram, I go through someone's feed and I realize man, I've missed days of their stuff. And when Facebook and Instagram show me some of their stuff, it's like days late. And Snapchat is I put Snapchat in the same category of social media experiences. So we're finally starting to see them reacting, I think, to some of the backlash from their recent redesign, and that their users are not happy. Just like with Zuckerberg saying, well, you know what you signed up for when you use Facebook in our terms of service. That's the wrong way to go about handling a consumer backlash. And for Snapchat, it was, nope, this is the new feed. It's here to stay. You better learn to get used to it. Well, people don't have to. Snapchat is another service in a long line of succession, which is just format. There is nothing about Snapchat which isn't replicatable on another platform. Look at all the recent changes to Instagram. So, they line right up with Vine. There was nothing that novel about Vine that Vine could sustain itself on its own. It was just a micro video sharing platform with an extreme limitation on the amount of video. If a user wanted to engage in that limitation, they could have gone to any other video streaming site and said, hey, I'm only going to do 7 seconds or 10 seconds or 8 seconds. And what did Instagram do? I think they did 15 to start. So no, this is not a good position for Snapchat to be in. What with take Bearpaw 34H. Got to get back to work, slacker. Go do it. Go do that, Bearpaw. Thanks for jumping into the live stream. I appreciate it. So anything that gets in the way, anything that interrupts the emotional connection that a user might have with the people that they follow on a service like this instantly means that they're going to devalue that service. I was looking at my own behavior, looking at how often I used to post to Instagram, how often I used to scan through my feed on Instagram. And it wasn't by design. It wasn't that I thought, oh, I hate that they removed chronological mode, so I'm going to stop using it as much. But that just naturally happened. These algorithms what they're trying to do is they're trying to create an addictive dopamine response. And they're trying to do that by manipulating the information that you see in a way that will keep you on the site longer. That works really well for Facebook. And we're going to get into Facebook and outrage traffic and stress and cortisol and all that fun stuff. Because Facebook sort of formatted itself as a blogging platform meets headline news generation source, and a cultivated feed fits into a social media experience that's not dissimilar from like an RSS reader, only cultivated by the people that you say you care about in your circles of families and friends. Snapchat doesn't have that same kind of long-form relationship. So keeping eyeballs on Snapchat longer means you need more novelty of that moment. As soon as a user has exhausted the novelty of that moment, then they're going to close the app and move on. And so the appeal is you're going to open up Snapchat multiple times throughout the day just to see what's new in that moment. You remove chronological from that, and it drastically reduces the urge to check in on what's happening in that moment. And I feel that's what happened to me with Instagram. I knew I wasn't going to get my friends in that moment. And I follow way too many people to sit there and try and scan through people's feeds individually. And it's just not something I'm capable of doing. And we talk about attention and how I feel I maybe have some attention issues. That's not something I'll have the diligence to perform on any kind of regular basis. So what happens? I suddenly radically devalue the overall Instagram experience. You're not impressing me by keeping photos in my stream that you think I'm going to like more because they were from days ago. You're telling me that my friends in that moment who wanted my attention while I was looking at the app or shortly within a certain window of looking at that app, that's not important to the discussion anymore. That's not important to the experience. I see a buddy of mine with kids at one of my favorite amusement parks. I want to be able to say, oh, dude, go hit the churro stand over a blah, blah, blah. And as I'm getting ready to publish that comment, oh, well, this photo was from 3 days ago. They're no longer at that amusement park. I am no longer a part of their lives in a meaningful way. And it's kind of creeper to go back through people's feeds a week, 2 weeks before and click on photos. You're not really improving the situation by only going a couple days back. Like, oh, here's a photo of me and my boyfriend from 3 days ago. Like, that's kind of weird. That's not something that's fun. And I think it sort of sours the whole experience. So Instagram kind of got back to a more cultivated but more immediate chronological feed. That's still not good enough. I think just pure chronology is the best way to keep people opening the app multiple times per day. They'll probably have shorter interactions every time they open the app, but ultimately I believe that you'll get more time on service through multiple short-form interactions than you will by trying to create a Facebook-like deep dive into everybody's social media. So I don't know. You tell me, folks. Is it too late for a Snapchat to come back from their recent redesign, shenanigans with the CEO, a stock of spectacles that isn't really interesting anymore, no hardware or innovation on the horizon? My hypothesis is we'll probably see Snapchat sold off for a fraction of what they could have made if they had sold out to Facebook, probably by 2020. I think the momentum of their current users can carry them through 2019. So you tell me, what do you think? Are you still using Snapchat? I never really got into it, so I'm the naysayer looking from the outside. But I was also totally right about Vine. So I just want to say my credentials for picking social media networks that will ultimately die is pretty spot on. I'm seeing Big Truth in Periscope. I'm seeing Brad. I'm seeing Lee123. And this is from from @VatProduce on Twitch. From Andrew Wallace. If I tried to quit Facebook, I would lose contact with a very large number of acquaintances that I don't talk to every day. We're going to be talking about Facebook a little bit more in just a bit, but I feel that there are probably ways around that, Andrew, and there's a human connection element that I think could be really interesting into the next phase of social media. But I want to move on to something super creepy as it pertains to social media. As if Facebook isn't creepy enough, because we'll get to that. But we're getting more information on the new social ranking citizen system that China is implementing. It's a social credit system where you're ranked based on the quality of interactions that you have. It sounds like an episode of Black Mirror, because it was an episode of Black Mirror where people would vote you up or vote you down on the experiences that they had with you face to face. And so this is by way of Business Insider. China started ranking citizens with a creepy social credit system. Here's what you can do wrong and the embarrassing, demeaning ways they can punish you. So I would highly recommend reading through this article. I'm just going to kind of bullet point some of the punishments. If your social credit score is too low, they can ban you from getting on a plane or a train. If your social credit score is too low, they can throttle your internet connection speeds. They can ban your children from the best schools. They can stop you from progressing in your job. They can keep you out of good hotels. And they can publicly publicly shame you as being a bad citizen. And there's already a prototype blacklist for people that this social system is looking to punish for their bad behavior. And there's also a list of good things that can happen. If your score is good, you can get discounts on energy bills, rent things without deposits, and get better interest rates at banks. Again, just based on your social media score. They will also give you preferential treatment on dating websites. So, sort of incentivizing good behavior with, that you'll get laid more approach. That's certainly a social credit that I'm sure a lot of internet users would like to partake of. And just a really chilling look at what the potential future of this type of social interaction might be. Obviously, I have very personal and very strong feelings about the notion of how this type of interaction and this kind of content can go down. Recently spent a lot of time in the world of Ready Player One, which we just covered on our last Geek Book Club. We did a review of the book, and we also did a comparison of the film against the book. And that's also contributing to my laryngitis, because we talked for almost 4 full hours on the book and the film. So our podcast on the film is almost as long as the movie is to watch, which is hilarious. So when we see this type of behavior instituted in a sort of government-backed fashion, I think it should bring up some very obvious concerns into social programming and authoritarian measures at controlling conversation, controlling behavior. Obviously, we have some things that we need to work out in terms of social interactions online. Anonymity is both a blessing and a curse. That doesn't mean that we scrap it and we shame people for bad behavior online. It means that we find ways of cultivating audiences in specific demographics, in specific locations, both in physical world and in digital world, and that we try and encourage the best possible conversation that we can. We have failed in that mission. The type of discourse that we have politically, the type of discourse that we have scientifically, the type of discourse that we have just interpersonally is radically poorer than what I feel it was before the days of aggressive 24/7, 365 plugged in social media. But that doesn't mean we scrap it. And that doesn't mean that we turn to, and you guys know I'm super liberal, but that doesn't mean that we turn to an authoritarian nanny state to try and encourage good behavior out of the citizenry. So we have to work towards having that better conversation, and we need to work towards supporting those platforms that give us the tools to have those better conversations. And that's something, again, I always appeal to the people who watch my content because you're savvier than most. You should be the people in your circle of family and friends who lead the discussion. You should be the people who are leading the conversation against the worst of our instincts, the triggerish instincts, the reactionary instincts that we all have. You know, the number of times I've gotten into useless debates and huge blow-up fights on Twitter. You know, that's a terrible platform for engaging in that kind of conflict. But it becomes this really satisfying, the pulse rate is up, the adrenaline is flowing, and there are times where I just can't restrain myself. That's a failing on my part. That absolutely speaks to one of the flaws in my character that can be exploited by a system designed to try and keep me utilizing their content delivery platform as much as possible. So we all need to be better. Renato Laporte, to be honest, there is now a controversy around an EU-wide blacklist for airlines to reject passengers. I'm all for it. Privacy laws forbid it right now, but you need to flag certain behaviors. I agree, but I'm very concerned. Oh, and then he goes on to say, but there is a limit for everything, so how to control the system. And that's what I don't believe we have an answer for yet. Because I agree with you. Even just some of the social aspects. Like when I was growing up, there was a rule. If you had the aisle, you had one armrest. If you had the window, you had another armrest. If you had the center seat, you got both armrests. And so there have been times where I fly in the center seat and I've got two huge obese individuals like totally crowding my space, taking up my armrests, and like there's nothing I can do. And I'm the asshole if I try and say something to them. I guess that just killed my PG rating. This podcast just went PG-13. Excuse me. So it's frustrating because we don't have the same sense of community in policing the actions of our family and friends. And I feel in times past, and I'm probably painting this with too much of a rose-colored glasses look back at my own childhood, but I feel that there was less immediacy to outright enraged conflict in an era of reality TV where if someone says anything to you, you instantly go to like chest puffery and like getting in their face, but getting in their face in that really hammy staged way where you're not really trying to have a fist fight, but you'll still throw some punches, but it's all totally manufactured outrage as if you've got cameras on you for some kind of reality show style statement. We've made it to an extreme. And again, especially politically, where we can't have any kind of consensus, we can't have any kind of compromise, we can't have any kind of rational discussion from grown-ups. Instead, we've got people that are so hardlined and tribal that we end up just pendulum swinging radically with every major administration change. That's not the way to go about conducting ourselves as a society. So we need to take a step back and look at what do we need to address before we can actually get on to changing these things. I don't believe China has the right solution. I believe there are some good ideas there that we could learn from. But I think most of the good ideas we could learn from would be countered by a lot of bad things we should definitely not do. That's still useful information for us to have. And Renato Laporte, PG demonetized. Yep, this podcast will probably give me another shadow demonetization. I'm going to drink some coffee here while I read from Sharil. The question is, who sets the limit? Someone with a conservative mindset or a liberal mindset or an authoritarian? That is a problem we need to find the answer soon. And it's one that we can't really find an answer to soon. That kind of speaks again to my because we do have some political news to talk about. Actually, you know what? Let me table that, Sherrill. Let me get through the next two stories, and we can come back to that idea. Because there's something happening in the United States, which is almost equally as creepy as what China's doing. So China is trying to find a way to rank and grade. Lover of tech, what's up? How you doing, bud? China is looking at ways to grade their citizens and incentivize good citizenry and punish bad citizenry. Here in the United States, Homeland Security is looking to compile a database of journalists and bloggers. They want to know, they're seeking a contractor who can monitor up to 290,000 global news sources that they're trying to keep a hand on. And they're looking to make a database of media influencers and the sentiment, the flavor of their commentary. That is also a very dicey and sensitive and chilling idea for a society which builds itself on some notion of First Amendment free speech. Why does Homeland Security want to track and compile this kind of information in such a broad swath? And what benefit would cataloging all of this information provide? I'm still very skeptical of how organizations like the NSA were tracking user data by way of texts and phone calls. There are some serious privacy implications, and I am pro-privacy to the point where I believe all consumers should have access to the best possible encryption on their mobile devices. But my bigger problem with what the NSA was doing was how much noise they were trafficking in and how little benefit we seemed to derive from compromising individuals' privacy. When you catalog that much information, you don't actually arrive at better law enforcement. You have way too much information to comb through to find the information that you're seeking. And the same thing I feel here, where you're creating a list of journalists, bloggers, media influencers. To what benefit? If someone is incredibly popular, they're easy to track. If someone is not very popular, then they probably don't have much spread or range or reach for their commentary. If they're engaging in problematic discussion or antisocial discussion or anarchistic discussion, if they don't have a wide following, then they're probably not a particularly dangerous source for law enforcement to consider, except maybe in the instances of trying to track a lone wolf. But we've already seen where direct interaction from people close to, say, like mass shooters. Man, if this podcast wasn't going to be getting demonetized before, it's certainly getting demonetized now. We already have a hard enough time serving law enforcement information on a silver platter to say, we are concerned with the actions of this individual. Please at least just look into some of the things they've been doing recently. We feel that there could be a problem there. Those warnings served directly to law enforcement often go ignored. So I wonder what would be the benefit of an organization, a department, Homeland Security, trying to track information on the tone of the commentary from journalists. I don't feel that there would be a significant benefit to security, to safety, with that kind of information just stored in a bucket somewhere. But with that information cataloged, chronicled, and tagged in a meaningful way, it becomes a pretty good list for public shaming. We can say, oh, well, you're writing something nasty about the president in 2024. Well, you posted on Facebook in 2010 about how much you didn't like this thing. And now that means you're discredited as a potential source for news, that you changed your mind about this other thing, or you once, held an idea that's vaguely, homophobic or racist or specious or in some negative way. And now we can discredit you as an author 20 years later. That to me becomes the fear that this just becomes another Nixon list. It becomes information that someone can utilize to go after political opponents and naysayers and detractors, not necessarily something that's going to keep the populace any safer. It doesn't shine a light on behavior that could potentially be disastrous or terroristic or something like that. So this is another unraveling story that I hope gets a little bit more media attention, but I had a hard time finding this on major news feeds. If it was reported on, it was a tiny little blurb. This came from biglawbusiness.com, which not the biggest name in legal news. I know, like, get it, biggest because it's big law business, but was very concerning to me. So I hope it's another thing that those of you who are engaged in this discussion can at least take a look at. I hate it because it makes me want to put on my tinfoil hat. But we also have an administration that acts very punitively against any kind of criticism. So it's not terribly surprising that they might be investigating the potential for this. And then also, if you're a contractor and you think that you've got the tools to properly manage, catalog, and monitor 300,000 global news sources, this might be the gig for you. Responses are due by April 13th. Only 7 companies, which I love that they put this in here. 7 companies, mainly minority or women-owned small businesses, have already expressed an interest in becoming a vendor for the contract. So you can go to the FedBizOps website for more information. From Cheryl, are you sharing the links in the YouTube or only on the site later? I will be posting all of the links. Because of the way that I do the live streaming on multiple platforms, I can't write I haven't figured out how to write the description for the video in the same way, so I still need to figure that out. This is a learning experience. You're getting to see the full spectrum of Juan Bagnell figure out how to do the internets, which is always kind of fun. So moving right along. This is another, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is a little outside the tech beat, but it's one that I want to share because it makes me crazy angry. Shell predicted dangers of climate change in the 1980s and knew fossil fuel industry was responsible. This is from The Independent, but there are a number of outlets that are reporting on this, and this follows shortly after we saw a similar report on internal documentation from Exxon. So in the report titled "The Greenhouse Effect," which was internal from Shell scientists, the authors warned that by the time the global warming becomes detectable, it could be too late to take effective countermeasures to reduce the effects or to even stabilize the situation. So again, we see another concerted effort from a specific industry in a very similar way to how we dealt with tobacco. We get data that starts to come out saying this could be bad. There's a vested interest in that corporation to continue making money on the infrastructure and the investment that they have in that product. So they don't try and discredit so much as they just try to confuse the general population by putting out conflicting information and then trying to point to that as some way of saying, well, because there's no consensus, then we don't believe that there is a direct risk. And this is a poor way to go about having these kinds of discussions. Same thing with like the food industry, looking at the recent change in our thinking and our behavior when it comes to fats versus sugars. You go back and I was looking at some old books, like an old Berenstain Bears book that I had about eating healthy. And they're recommending, like the bottom 3/4 of the food pyramid is like meat and bread. And you're like, okay, I don't think that's true anymore. It's not a good way to go about maintaining a healthy diet. And that's totally a product of its time. We had that kind of commentary when I was a kid. Grains, whole grains, that's what's going to be super healthy for you. Just eat tons of bread. That's good. Carbs, yeah. But watch out for that fat. We're going to remove fat and put sugar in all of your products. And now we're finally getting an industry to shift gears and start looking at more tailored consideration for an individual's diet. I don't want this to be too much of a soapbox on things like, what is healthier? Should you be vegan or should you go keto or something like that? What I would love to see happen in the next 50 years, maybe 100 years, is to start looking at the genetic profiles for individual patients and to say, because of these types of markers, you might do better on on a keto diet. Because of these types of markers, you should probably go, whole foods, vegan. Based on this, you really need to be eating more fish. I would love to see medical science eventually progress to a point where we can get to that kind of tailored sentiment, because, these things become cults just like anything else. How do you know someone's a vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you. How do you know someone's keto? Don't worry, they'll tell you while eating a ton of bacon. That kind of stuff we need to iron out. So ultimately, getting back to Shell and Exxon, we're still going to have to unravel all of the commentary and all of the confused dialogue, and the fact that we actually do have a pretty solid scientific consensus on global warming from sort of the top level academic standpoint, and getting that information into consumers' hands. And, I would really love to believe that we could change our behavior in small ways that could have some kind of impact on the situation, if we could just engage in grown-up discussions. These little baby steps that the industry's taken towards like better fuel economy and gas-powered vehicles is nice. But getting around some of the headier problems with things like public transit, electric vehicles, self-driving cars, more efficient and more fuel-efficient means of passenger delivery, and then also what to do with airplanes. Because you could drive for a couple years in an EV and not directly contribute to CO2, eventually make your car CO2 neutral if you drive it long enough because of the CO2 that's produced by making the battery. And then one airline trip can set you back a couple years of driving in your EV. I don't know if it's a couple years. It might only be like a year or so. But regardless, we need to find ways around some of these problems, and we're not going to get there if we're overly beholden to major corporations. Major corporations that have a profit incentive to continue confusing the public on what the realities of the situation are. Same thing happened with smoking. Same thing happened with food. Same thing might be happening with cell phones. There's, again, data to suggest not causation, but correlation with cell phone use and cancer. So all of those things are pretty gross. And all of those industries have engaged in information campaigns to confuse the general public. And so, again, I get twitchy about, Shell joining this conversation, because oil companies have had a pretty long history of trying to halt progress on things like super high mileage vehicles, super fuel efficient vehicles, and electric vehicles, and different flavors of diesel. Like if we could go biodiesel, if we could utilize more ethanol, other ways to shake up the situation. And it's all under the illusion of competition. Well, you could have an Exxon and Shell, and those are your choices. But I don't get to choose where I purchase my fuel from. Like, I would like to only buy Canadian crude. I don't want to buy crude that came from the Middle East. I would like to send an economic message to countries that I don't want to do business with, that I will go out of my way to spend more on a product, knowing that it came from a more responsible or more conscientious ally of my nation's government. And at the same time, I would also like to see, I would also like to see more access to other types of fuel. Many cars could be true flex fuel vehicles. Like the engine design and the timing design isn't difficult to adjust between gasoline, petrol, and like an ethanol solution. And so I would like to be able to roll up to a gas station and have regular petrol, a more ethanol heavy blend, maybe a hydrogen option, and an electric option. And that would be competition. And that would be competition at the actual, source, and competition around town. Because then I would go out of my way to support the gas stations, which are improving infrastructure, not limiting my choices as a consumer. So these are the things that really bother me. It's the same thing that we had with like the sort of soft regulation we have on the telecommunications industry. There's no reason why we should have flirted with this GSM versus CDMA nonsense here in the United States. But Sprint and Verizon saw an opportunity for better consumer lock-in, prevented you from taking your phones and creating an unlocked market like they saw in that terrible Europe place. Oh no, in the UK, someone can just buy a phone and take it to any carrier they want. Well, that's actually competition. That means those carriers actually have to compete against each other for a better service at a better price for that consumer. Here in the United States, you could get locked in and your phone could be, broken if it left the carrier that you bought it from. So that's not competition. And in a free market, if you're a conservative, we should care about that kind of business infrastructure because it's better for everybody and everyone would make more money. But instead, we kind of create this preferential treatment zone for the top players in an industry to make sure that they don't actually have to compete. And people seem to be fine with socialism for Comcast and Verizon and cutthroat capitalism for everyone below that. But I digress, because I do have another government story to tackle. Moving on to this next one here. Again, this also comes down to competition. Ajit Pai's ties to Sinclair Broadcasting under investigation at the FCC. The FCC Inspector General is investigating whether Ajit Pai, the agency's chairman, improperly used his power to benefit Sinclair Broadcasting. We talked about this last week a little bit more, talking about Sinclair Broadcasting buying up media outlets and then forcing local news channels to all deliver the same Orwellian doublethink, newspeak news broadcast about how fake news is hurting our democracy and how this Sinclair-owned channel is going to help set the story straight. And of course, they're all reading the exact same script, and you can sync them all up together, and it's haunting when you see dozens and dozens of local news channels all saying the same thing. We are Legion. Television conglomerate has pushed its local news stations to run commentary segments that praise the Trump administration and is currently seeking a merger which would vastly expand its reach. I am no big fan of Ajit Pai. I would love to hear what your thoughts might be on this, because my hypothesis is absolutely nothing is going to happen. My hypothesis is the FCC Inspector General is a part of the FCC reporting to the chairman that they're investigating, and because there is no outside overwatch, there is no outside oversight, that at most there will be some kind of wrist slap. We know we did wrong. Wah, wah. But we're not going to change any actual policy because this is what's going to be best for the country in terms of competition. All of these regulations are strangling business owners, except that they're not. Except that people were making billions before, they'll make billions after, and that this is a terrible state for media diversification and media commentary, and the ability to find different voices in this space is woefully low. So, dang, I'm really sorry I'm coughing in your ears so much. I'm going to drink some more coffee right now. So removing this rule that Ajit Pai got rid of, it's a decades-old rule on media consolidation. Sinclair stations are in 72% of U.S. households, and they want more. So I feel that that's an inappropriate level to be placed at. Again, whether or not you feel that the political spectrum is totally gamed, there is something to be said for trying to manage content delivery, communication, stuff like that. And we need a healthy regulatory agency to do it. It's going to take us. So let's say the Trump administration is removed in 2020 and we get anyone else in there, even another conservative challenger who just gets us back to a more traditional political operation. Or maybe he's impeached. I don't know. Even a Mike Pence is a terrible, in my opinion, a terrible outcome for the country, but is more easily managed and is easier to fight politically in a traditional sense than someone like Trump, who is just a rogue agent of chaos. If we got to that point, it would still take us years to undo what's happened over the last year at the FCC, and to untangle and unravel the media interests that have sort of infiltrated what the FCC is capable of regulating, and get back to a point where they even have any teeth to execute policy would take us a long time. That's worth fighting for, and that's worth getting back to, and that's worth us having these discussions so that we can have a fair, open marketplace. Regulations at the top do not deliver a fair, open marketplace in any arena, in any market. Deregulation at the state and city level could help tremendously. And there I'm totally in agreement and lockstep with more libertarian-minded individuals. If you have a state law or a city law that prevents competition in the technology space, we need to be examining how to get rid of that yesterday, today, tomorrow, immediately, getting on track to better services and better delivery to all citizens, even those who are written off as being unprofitable in rural areas. We absolutely need to address those problems. But those problems aren't fixed by top-down deregulation. Those problems are actually made worse by top-down deregulation. So it's a very nuanced and delicate situation that we find ourselves in. And we absolutely lack the political leadership, the will, and the fortitude to address it in a meaningful fashion. And I don't believe we will until a few more people are voted out of office. A few younger people who actually understand the ramifications of this tech are voted into office, and that we see a healthier debate from the wings of social democrats versus the wings of libertarians. I think both are probably wrong. Looking at socialism versus libertarianism, I don't think either could really work in today's political and economic climate, but both are aspirational. Libertarians value human dignity by your ability to perform tasks and to provide wealth, and they value it. That's aspirational. A socialistic viewpoint values human dignity by considering how the lowest of a population are treated against the richest. What bare minimum of wealth distribution and of social progress can you examine from the people who are most in danger of falling through a capitalist framework? So that also doesn't, I mean, like a Star Trek style communism also wouldn't work in today's political climate and economic climate. But the debate between those two aspirational notions, a debate between a political ideology which values the strongest, the healthiest, the most cutthroat, the hungriest, against a political ideology which tries to deliver dignity to the lowest of a population. If we could compromise in between those two political ideologies, we'd be in the best possible place for actually arriving at some kind of consensus. Reality sounds like it lives somewhere in between those two fantasy lands. And that brings me to my next political story. And this is a story on net neutrality again, coming by way of Motherboard. Let me click on this right here. Congress's biggest opponent of net neutrality is getting destroyed in midterm election polls. So Motherboard, you're not really helping because she's not getting destroyed. She's down by 10 points in Tennessee. This is Marsha Blackburn. Marsha Blackburn represents Tennessee. Tennessee is home to Chattanooga. Chattanooga, Tennessee has one of the most successful experiments ever created for publicly funded broadband internet access. Chattanooga got a grant from the Department of Energy to start rolling fiber to home. And they were the first in the country, not Google Fiber. Chattanooga was the first in the country to arrive at gigabit speeds. And gigabit speeds, I believe, at the time they were launched, only cost $80 per subscriber. Everything is managed through their local energy concern. The DOE is also using Chattanooga as a test bed to examine the future of our energy grid. So if every house is cabled up with fiber, we would have a much better infrastructure for defending against attacks to our energy grid. We would have much smarter abilities to route power between different devices, better warnings and better billing on things like utilizing dishwashers and washers and dryers and refrigerators during peak energy usage. I mean, you also look out here on the West Coast, San Diego has a pretty fragile infrastructure, and it doesn't take much to start throwing rolling brownouts once all the air conditioners start kicking on in Southern California. That would be helped tremendously by an infrastructure where we had gigabit fiber to the home. And so DOE dropped some cash on them. But since getting that public funding, this has been a wildly profitable and hugely successful venture for Tennessee. So because it's been so successful and it's cabled up all of the, as a huge number of residents in Chattanooga, obviously Tennessee would be interested in fulfilling that infrastructure and that rollout to the rest of Tennessee. There are some major problems with rural areas of Tennessee being woefully underserved in terms of any kind of internet access. Those people are horrifically marginalized. Their children don't get the same benefits for education. That citizenry doesn't get the same benefit for healthcare, for maintenance, for education, for jobs. All of they're irrelevant to the world economy in 2018. We look at Marsha Blackburn has been a leading campaigner in making sure that the Chattanooga experiment could not extend beyond Chattanooga. And that's a terrible state of affairs, because if we had started this process when Chattanooga started lighting up gigabit, we would be much further along in making everyone a better, stronger, smarter player on the world economy. Again, they have entrenched players at the top who have a vested interest in not rolling out services to poor people because they can't make as much money on those poor rural people, so they're just irrelevant. But free market. We can't let anyone find an alternative to that because free market. And that's another really terrible state of affairs. So I'm really heartened to see that Marsha Blackburn, who has pretty much run without any significant major challenger in Congress, in trying to move to the Senate, is facing significant pushback. 10% in Tennessee is a pretty good bump, but that'll narrow significantly by the time we actually get to an election. So that's another area where if we're not putting the pressure on, then we're not really achieving, or we're not really going to make any kind of substantial change in policy. Without a few more messages like that, looking at someone who's obviously gaming the internet market for her own personal political ends, we're not gonna actually move the needle. We actually have to get people to care about this stuff, and it's hard to get someone who hasn't experienced the potential of better data services to care about why they should care about better data services. So there's an entire education campaign that needs to happen from the geeks. And we need to be willing, able, and available to engage in this discourse and engage in this commentary so that we can have these conversations with people and show them, you're missing out on opportunities. You're missing out on re-education. You're missing out on healthcare. You're missing out on entertainment. Even just the entertainment side is worth having that conversation. And that's kind of a bummer. So that brings me to my last story, what I was teasing before, Facebook, because Facebook is terrible for you and we should all quit it. This is just the abstract. They haven't published the full article yet in a public sense, but this is from the Journal of Social Psychology, The Burden of Online Friends, the Effects of Giving Up Facebook on Stress and Well-Being. From the abstract, people occasionally choose to cut themselves off from their online social network by taking extended breaks from Facebook. This study investigated whether abstaining from Facebook reduces stress, but also reduces subjective well-being because of the resulting social disconnection. This is a very limited study, and it's just a survey, but participants were 138 active Facebook users, were assigned to either a condition in which they were instructed to give up Facebook for 5 days or continue to use Facebook as normal. So let's say they split that down the middle. You're talking 70 people in one and 70 people in the control, maybe. Perceived stress and well-being, as well as salivary cortisol, were measured before and after the test period. Relative to those in the normal Facebook condition, those in the no Facebook condition experienced lower levels of cortisol and life satisfaction. Our results suggest that the typical Facebook user may occasionally find the large amount of social information available taxing, and Facebook vacations could ameliorate the stress, at least in the short term. I kind of feel like those of us in the digital space have probably already arrived at anecdotal conclusions like that for ourselves. My experiences in Facebook, gaming the chronological feed, making it nearly impossible to see what people are doing in the moment, ditto Instagram, naturally curtailed the curiosity and the interest that I had in trying to keep up with my family and friends. Because I'm removed from the conversation in most places. And I also got that sour taste in my mouth when Facebook pages started becoming digital extortion in schemes. You've got 1,000 Facebook followers and you just posted this post, but we're only going to show 10 people your post, and you can pay us to reach all of the other people that already said they liked your content. I can't engage in good faith in a platform that withholds the very people that I'm trying to build a network around. So this is kind of going back to Andrew Wallace's, Fat Produce on Twitch was talking about how there are family members and friends that he only occasionally hears from or only occasionally gets in contact with. And this is going to be really pie in the sky, and I totally appreciate why it's not the right fit for everybody else. But I still use my Facebook account as a way to cull through the names of friends and acquaintances that I do want to keep in touch with, and then I just get in touch with them through traditional means. It's kind of a big deal when I get a text from an old acquaintance, not a friend, but someone that I was friendly with for a time, out of the blue, and they just say, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? What's up? And it's kind of like the digital equivalent of writing a letter. Something so quaint about a personalized email, which wasn't just a burped or vomited canned piece of marketing for my life. Because that's kind of what we're doing on Facebook. We're either marketing to try and get negative attention or positive attention. Oh, look at this amazing picture of my baby. I've shared thousands of pictures of my baby. Oh no, I'm not feeling well. Please send me good vibes. I need attention from you on Facebook with likes and comments and shares because I don't feel well. I don't think that's useful interaction. I don't think that interaction benefits me or really helps me keep abreast of what those people are really doing in their lives. But a couple texts back and forth, and you're like, oh, had that thing ever work out with that project? Oh, it went well. Or, oh, it fell apart. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, man. I hope things are looking up for you later. And then I'm out. And that's way more meaningful than me posting a post on Facebook hoping that it will engage in some kind of personally validating conversation, or I'll get a bunch of smiley faces on it or something like that. From Steve Jobs, reminds me I should check my Farmville. I never got into Farmville. I started one up, and if I even knew where to get back into it on Facebook, it would probably be a decrepit post-apocalyptic wasteland where the animals have taken over the farm, and some animals are more equal than other animals. But yeah, I can't jump into Facebook. This is from Sharil Rahman. My only problem is FOMO with friends and family. Other than that, Facebook is a bit of a light experience for me. And I think a lot of us have backed off the really heavy deep dive interactions on Facebook. And I think a major component to that is the way that Facebook treats our data. Not necessarily even getting into the privacy aspects. It's just they don't seem to care about the real human moment-to-moment interactions, and they're trying to serve us stale content that they think will keep us on the site longer. I think that works really well in the short term, but long term, it starts to devalue the actual human experience of being in that moment. And once you do that, there's less incentive to check in regularly because you know you won't be getting the content people are putting out in that moment. Also from Sharil, that sounds like a great game. I would love to see a post-apocalyptic Farmville. Again, I'm a sucker for Orwell, just do an Orwell Farmville. And I would probably, unfortunately, succumb to the worst base pay-to-win instincts that I'm trying to wean myself off of my Marvel Future Fight game. Oh, can we talk about gaming for just a second? So I'm done spending money on Marvel Future Fight. Netmarble, totally Farmville Fallout version. That's actually probably a better way to put it, Steve Jobs. Yeah, sort of like Fallout 6, Farmville. So I was heavy into Marvel Future Fight, and I've spent hundreds of dollars on that mobile game over years of playing it. I used it as a graphics benchmark for Android reviews because it's so poorly optimized for Android that if you had a really beefy, powerful phone, you could play it well. It was a good showcase for just the raw computing power of your device. But I got to move on. I've got to find something else to play. I stuck with it for as long as I did because the guild that I'm in, the alliance that I'm in, is actually a really fun group of guys. And I liked that when we started doing alliance versus alliance combat stuff, these guys were really fun to play with. So you'd get a map and you'd put your little Marvel characters into the map somewhere and try and defend or attack depending on what the other alliances were doing. That was really cool. Unfortunately, it has just fallen to who spent the most. And our alliance is probably one of the highest ranked casual alliances you can find. We're regularly paired up against whales, people who each individual player has spent thousands and thousands of dollars on that game. So I was looking around. I really like Marvel, so I was going to see Marvel Strike Force was just released. I've been seeing TV commercials for it. I wanted to check it out, see what does this have to offer? What is it? What is the experience like? What is it capable of doing? And from the very beginning, it's just another random number generating event game. So they always start you off where it's really easy to accrue basic materials, and your low power characters can be surprisingly effective even in advanced game modes. But there's a really high level cap. There's a really high level cap that you can't quite hit very easily unless you spend a ton of money. But that's okay, because to start, you don't really need to hit that high level cap. Well, yeah, that's kind of a drug pusher mentality. Yo, kids, the first hit's free, and then if you want more stuff and you want to keep feeling good, well, just kick us a little cash every now and then. And then you start getting into really fleecing that community. Every free to play but pay to win game follows this same kind of structure. Get them in cheap or get them in for free, offer up a whole bunch of stuff so you get those dopamine hits. It all feels really good. The random number generating events are all going your way. Man, it's just like I can't lose. It's just like I'm in Vegas at a slot machine that just keeps paying out. And then somewhere after the first year or two, then you just radically start cranking up, you know, the difficulty and the sort of showmanship. You really start weighing heavy on the collector aspect. Well, you got to have every single character. You got to rank them all up. You've got to make them competitive. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And this is becoming a major problem. It's not okay that we're putting these kinds of mechanics into games that target kids. I don't care if it's not just a straight EA style loot crate situation, a loot box situation. Any type of random number generating event which radically affects gameplay, halts progress, and can be circumvented through some sort of real world currency mechanic absolutely needs to die. It absolutely needs to go away, especially on franchises that are targeting entire families. Star Wars, Marvel, Disney Emoji Blast has mechanics in it which I would find objectionable as a parent for my kids to be interacting with. That's not okay. And this has gone beyond just EA. EA is the bad guy. EA is the bad guy here. They kind of invented the kind of mechanic that we're in right now. But EA still gets their licensing marching orders from Disney, and Disney has not shown that they are particularly concerned with their licensee holders and developers incorporating these kinds of mechanics into other games. Netmarble, whoever's doing Marvel Strike Force, and the countless numerous other games which are under their purview that also follow these similar styles of game mechanic. I mean, like, even just ranking up material in Marvel Future Fight, you can grind for weeks to develop this one type of crystal that can make your character more powerful, and then you throw that material into a random number generator, and you can get nothing out of it. So weeks worth of effort of grinding and gaming can result in zero improvement for your character. And it feels like a relief when it goes your way, but that's not gameplay. That's not end game content. That is artificially restricting you from finishing a character to prolong your experience in the game. So I stopped giving them money the end of last year. I used to do this little monthly, like $3 crystal. You would get like premium in-game currency. And that went a long way towards abbreviating the dumber, grindier aspects and getting you focused on the gameplay aspects that you really liked. From there on out, though, every single update over the last year has been, how do we put more stuff behind individual paywalls? How do we devalue the premium currency to get people to buy special mission packs and random number generated chests that unlock certain types of material? And how do we keep them grinding as pain points so that then they want to alleviate the pain point by abbreviating the amount of grind? Well, you can also do that with actual in-game currency. So this is not okay. And this is only fueling how much I want to boycott all of Disney. I don't want to give Disney any business if this is how they're going to allow developers to treat the franchises that I'm going to be exposing my kids to. I want to grow up. My daughter went to a birthday party for one of the kids at her daycare. went to a birthday party at this amazing like bounce castle place. It's just room after room after room of inflatable bounce castles and slides and towers and stuff. It was awesome. And they had one of the employees dress up as Spider-Man and play with the kids. The look on my daughter's face was incredible. She got picked up by Spider-Man and they did web shooters together. She's not yet 3. And it was like, it was the same face she made meeting Spider-Man as she did meeting a fairy princess at the LA Zoo for Easter. It was the same face that she met sitting on Santa Claus's lap. Spider-Man is already a huge part of my daughter's life, just as Spider-Man is an amazingly huge part of my childhood growing up, and that's something I want to grow with her. I want to experience again, I mean, because I'm a selfish post-Gen Xer, I want to experience this stuff through her eyes and see all of the stories and all of these comics fresh. I want to share with her some of the old classic comics, like Maximum Carnage, when she gets to a point where she can be a little bit older and get into the symbiotes, and Venom, the Venom miniseries comic runs and stuff. I want her to be a part of this, and I want her to love it just as much as I do, because she already does. Man, the look on her face was incredible. But that also means now I'm going to have to sit there and police, like, if there's a Spider-Man video game where in-game content is restricted because of paywall mechanics, I'm going to have to know about that before we play the game, and I might have to tell her, no, we can't play this game. This game isn't really Spider-Man, because Spider-Man wouldn't try and scam money from you. Spider-Man is a better guy than that, but the people who made the game are abusing Spider-Man. God, I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to like hold that stuff back from her, but I'm going to have to. So it's such a pain. It doesn't have to be this way, and companies can be insanely successful without engaging in this last, we're only going to stroke the egos of our shareholders to get to that, to get to that tier. As it pertains directly to Spider-Man, from Sherrill, here's hoping the Spider-Man PS4 is not behind a paywall or loot box. Actually, if I remember correctly, the announcement that just came out for the new Spider-Man game that's being released, I believe they won't be doing microtransactions, or they're going to be limiting microtransactions to only cosmetic parts of the game. And I also have to throw a huge shout out of glory, because the voice of Spider-Man in that game is Yuri Lowenthal. And Yuri Lowenthal is one of the most amazing voice actors I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He was at the talent agency that I used to work at. And one of my first auditions with Yuri, he auditioned for the role of Peter Parker / Spider-Man in one of the older animated series. This was about 11 years ago. And hearing him audition for Spider-Man was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. He was so clear in his differences between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. It was so apparent who was the geekier character and who was the more self-assured, what happened when he put on the mask. And there was this one line of dialogue which was supposed to be delivered in sort of an action-y way. And without doing any gimmicky things, like he wasn't like dancing around the microphone to try and make it sound like he was moving. He stayed right in front of it. And if you closed your eyes and you listened to the way that he delivered that line, it sounded like he was swinging through the air. And I don't even know how to articulate what it was that he did. It was just this brute force, this passion of imagination and this passion for that kind of action. And he is personally such a huge fan of these types of franchises that it all just came out in this amazing audition. I think he was one of the top picks, but they ended up going with someone else. So ever since that first audition, I've always believed Yuri would be an incredible Spider-Man, and he's finally getting the opportunity to show off like just how good a Peter Parker he could be. So I'm really excited for this next Spider-Man game. And again, that'll be an experience that I could point my daughter to when she gets a little bit older. If they don't have dumb restrictions on gameplay to force you to spend money. But let's say she's a big fan of Star Wars and we keep seeing more EA-style joints like Battlefront. No, she's not going to play Star Wars games. And that's going to be something we're going to have to take away from her. And that sucks, because she shouldn't have to choose like that. The keepers of these properties should understand the weight of the mythology that is placed on their shoulders and accept that they'll just have to be okay with insane amounts of money from game sales, and they'll just have to back off the even bigger amounts of money that come from putting pain points in games for microtransactions. Let me get through some of these comments, because you guys kind of lit up on this gaming thing. No big surprise. I know the political stuff was kind of a downer. From Steve Jobs, can you imagine a virtual immersion haptic Spider-Man type arcade? Dude, I want so bad. Like, at the end of Ready Player One, I didn't love the movie, but at the end of Ready Player One, where they're all on harnesses, I just kept thinking about like a Spider-Man or an Iron Man experience where your feet really leave the ground could be amazing. And then from Sherrill responding to Steve Jobs, ouch, the stretches you would need to do. That's true too. I used to be a dancer in a former life. I am not currently flexible enough in my current state to pull off Spider-Man to any realistic or immersive degree. From Kyle Netherwood, have you heard about Shadow of War removing all of the loot boxes in the game? This is one of the ones, Shadow of War, and I think there's another property that's coming out too, that they're gutting their microtransaction system. We talked about this on Newegg Now, and both Trisha and I, like, we got the news bulletin about 20 minutes before we were prepping to go live, and we made our producer like put that in. We've got to talk about that. That's a huge deal, and we were both stupid excited. So yeah, Kyle, absolutely. Now I'm looking to really spend money because I didn't get Shadow of War. Now I want to buy the game just to buy the game to support them in sort of a second phase of Shadow of War. Games don't have the same kind of resale market or a translation market that movies do. So if you find a developer that's doing good work and they've got an older game, it's a big deal to go out there and put your cash into supporting the developers that you care about and to supporting the business practices that you care about. And it's also after that point where you get games for cheap. So I actually just signed up for the Humble Bundle, the Humble Monthly Bundle. And so on my Patreon, I'm going to start giving away games just kind of randomly. If you're not already subscribed to my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. But it's just fun. There's some old classic games, some really quirky indie games, some really fun stuff. And I'm not going to be able to play through all of it. So why not spread the wealth? I'm going to be giving some of that stuff away. And it's just kind of fun to take a look back on. And I might just do something silly like everyone who's never played Portal, in the next 5 minutes, I will buy you a copy of Portal. I'm not doing that today, but I might do that coming up just because that is an experience that needs to continuously be shared generationally. Even as we completely outpace the graphics, even as the game mechanics start to feel quaint, you're going to have that little kid experience from Back to the Future 2, like, oh, you have to play with your hands. That's a baby's game. That's something that I feel we can continue to share as a storyteller experience. I had one other here. A lot of people just saying that pay-to-win games are terrible. F them all. From TK Bay, I do that now with my son and his online gameplay. Yeah, I like, kids aren't going to understand the paywall restrictions and the effect that it's having on their brain as their brains are still developing. That's really tough to unravel for a child. Why a cooldown clock or an energy meter or a crystal requirement is stopping them from playing the experience that they really enjoyed. And I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with the Super Nintendo. The only thing that would like prevent me from playing the Super Nintendo was a brownout, my crappy old TV dying, or my mom telling me to turn the game off. Nothing else halted my progress except my ability to play the game well. From Sherrill, I've yet to watch Ready Player One, frowny face. I need to find time to head to the cinema. Sherrill, I'm still recommending people go and catch it if they enjoyed the film, if they enjoyed the book, or they're just interested in this kind of story. We did a 2-hour podcast on the film and comparing it to the book, so don't watch that because it's full of spoilers. But I had a lot of criticisms, and I'm not going to repeat them here. But after you maybe catch the film, maybe go and check the Geek Book Club, and you can catch our full commentary on that. Okay, virtual haptic super ghouls and ghosts. Steve Jobs, I'm not masochistic enough to put on a haptic suit to play super ghouls and ghosts. That would be a pretty terrible state of affairs. So, folks, my voice is getting to its final breaking point, so I think it's about time we wrap this up. I have a couple more minutes here if you guys have questions. I saw someone else asking, hold on. I saw someone else asking if I was going to be doing a P20 review. I want to get back to that. Oh, this is a good suggestion. Sherrill, At Wombagnell, how about Star Trek timelines for a benchmark? It uses the Unity engine. I might switch over to that. Thanks, Cheryl. That's actually a pretty good call. And I'm a sucker for Star Trek content. And then from Ali, will you get the Huawei P20 Pro and review it? Maybe compare it to the Lumia 1020. This is just repeating something I said at the top of the show, Ali. And Cheryl kind of sent you a message on this too. But I do want to cover the P20. It's just that I'm not going to get there anytime soon. And I am going to be looking to review phones over longer periods of time, longer conversations on them, and more revisiting some of those older devices too. Because there's also just a ton of other things that I want to be talking more about. I want to be talking more about gaming gear and laptops, high-end audio equipment, and all of this stuff. Like there are so many other aspects of. I don't really feel that the phone or the box or the laptop is as important right now as what we can do on it. And that's one of the major things that I want to empower people to take a look at. You can create amazing content. You can consume incredible media from this supercomputer that lives in your pocket. So why are we spending $700, $800, $900, $1,000 on a phone just to check our Facebook? Like, we used to make fun of people that would buy $3,500 iMacs to then just use the web browser. And it's about time we got back to that with phones. From Cheryl, what are you using to stream from your Panny to YouTube again? If you look at the video descriptions on any of my other YouTube videos, I have a kit list of all the equipment that I use, and those links take you to an Amazon affiliate page. Again, clicking on any of those affiliate links helps support production on this channel. So I've got the entire list of the things that I'm using currently to produce content. You can check that out. From Fat Produce, yes, you told me about World of Warships. I actually do need to check that out too. From Akasuna, do you play Souls games? I don't know what Souls games are, so I don't. I guess I would have to say no. And Cheryl agrees with that, Fat Produce. So World of Warships and Star Trek, I will check those out. From Steve Jobs, high-end sound wave type ting-tangs will revolutionize the world. I agree, because I'm an audio nut. And from Cheryl, oh, how about PUBG? Kyle Netherward, Dark Souls. Do you play Dark Souls? Okay, yeah, I need to check out Dark Souls. I really haven't gotten into it. But PUBG, I've dabbled with a little bit on my desktop. I haven't spent any time on my phone. And Dick Prescott just joined on Periscope. Dick, I'm wrapping the show up, but you've got an hour and a half of me struggling to talk that you can listen to also. So to wrap this up, a couple shout outs. Again, thank you everyone who joined the live chat on Twitch, on YouTube, on Periscope. I'm going to make it through the end of this podcast, I promise. Every Monday morning, I broadcast to all three simultaneously, and then afterwards I put out an audio feed, which you can find in your favorite podcast catcher under the SGGQA podcast, where we also have interviews and conversations with other people in the tech and lifestyle commentary arena. Going to have a few really fun content creator interviews coming up soon, so you're going to want to check those out. And I have to plug my conversation with Dr. Allison Grimes, head of audiology, the director of audiology at UCLA, as she sat down with me to have an amazing conversation about smartphones and hearing loss, especially the trends that we've seen over the last 10 years as smartphone adoption has been on the rise, what we've seen in hearing degradation in young people, in teenagers and young adults. So that's still something I'm going to be plugging a lot on my channel, and I'm going to be putting a video teaser up on my YouTube channel, but the full conversation is only available on that podcast link. So check out the SGGQA podcast, or if you subscribe to my Patreon will be home to the ad-free feed of the SGGQA podcast, where I'll be cutting out the commercials that I stitch into the main public feed. So if you want to support production in any way that you can afford to support production for my content, I'm trying to give you guys some fun perks over there. Production diaries, behind the scenes. I'll be sharing my video that I'm collaborating with Mr. Mobile. The entire raw feed of that video is going to be going up on my Patreon later today, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy, and I hope you'll join the conversation over there too. Also be on the lookout for more Geek Book Club commentary. This month for April, we're reading Master and Commander, the first Master and Commander book at Fat Produce. picked a book that is the start of a 20-book series. So I don't know that we'll be getting through the entire series on the Geek Book Club, but we're going to start it. And we're going to see how this amazingly British book sort of stacks up to other types of fantasy media and historical fiction in that we've kind of come to love and adore. So check that out. Again, too many people in the live chat to thank, but I thank everyone who joined this conversation. You know where you can find me around the internets at SomeGadgetGuy, and where you can find new content creators on our glowing rectangles on Reddit, a little Reddit community all dedicated to supporting new voices in the space. I hope you'll check that out too. But Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of the social media that you should be cutting yourself off from to reduce your cortisol levels are all of the places where you can pick an argument with me and get your cortisol levels to skyrocket through the roof. And of course, you can find me on those social media sites as at SomeGadgetGuy. Every Thursday, New Egg Now with my co-host Trisha Hirschberger. We talk about gaming and hardware news. So much stuff going on, and I'm really excited that you guys have all been along for the ride, have all been along for the conversation. And this is the final end of this week's Monday Morning Tech Chat, and I will catch you all on the next podcast. Take care.